thank you guys for showing up. I have to admit, there was a little bit of false advertising. It said this is about doubling ARPDAU with events and casual games, which it is about, but it's mainly about running a raid for an audience of primarily older females. We did double our ARPDAU, but there are some other consequences of what we did. It was kind of an experiment, and so that's what I'm here to talk about. Is sort of running, you think of a raid, it's like a World of Warcraft type thing, but for grannies. So let me get into it. So first of all, just quickly, who am I? Who's HitPoint? HitPoint's a 6-year-old work-for-hire based studio. We build a lot of casual hidden object games or hidden object adventures. Our biggest one was we were first-party partners with Microsoft, along with Arcadium, which I know Neil from, for the launch of Windows 8. And Microsoft had a problem. They had a great crowd with that from Xbox and Xbox Live, but it was all dudes. And they thought, with Windows 8, we need to reach out to a broader audience. Let's have our launch title include, a title, a type of genre that will attract, a more female market. So they came to us. We built Adara. It's a 5-episode, Myst meets Indiana Jones with a lady hero. Pretty epic title. It's top grossing in the Windows 8 store, which is not saying much just because Windows 8 didn't end up having that big of a economy, but we were proud of it. And a lot of kind of the innovation that we did in terms of the model for Adara led to a lot of what we're doing today. And me, so I've been in the industry. A lot of people know me actually through my older brother. His name's Alex St. John. He invented DirectX, is what he says, which is Microsoft's gaming strategy. It led to the Xbox. I lived in the shadow for the most time, but I've also benefited a lot. I've been working professionally in games since I was 18. I led my first development team of 30 when I was 20 at a company called Monolith. And I've been in and out of the game industry since and started 2 companies. HitPoint's my second one. So, all right, now on to the meat. So I'm here to talk about one of our titles. It's called Seaside Hideaway. If you played Gardens of Time, then you've essentially played Seaside Hideaway. It's a clone. It was a title that we were doing as a contract that ultimately they ran out of funding and we acquired. And so here we are, all of a sudden running this kind of game as a service, hidden object game. The audience, the slide got cut off, but these are all women and their ages. So 34% of our users were 55 and older. 45 to 54 is 25%. Almost our entire audience was older women. The game loop, like I said, if you played Gardens of Time, you go find stuff. You have chapters of hidden object games, and you earn money, and then use that to build up your town. And the audience, they just love it, right? They can't get enough. Very active on the forums. They love the art. The theming of the title is kind of, if you've ever seen hotel paintings like Thomas Kincaid, that was the art. So it's kind of like a vacation theme. Anyways, the ladies loved it. So that's great. Except there's kind of a dark side that we found out pretty quickly. Which is interesting, was that you think of older female audience as being kind of sweet, or they kind of nice, and we found pretty quickly that's not true at all. They're about as core as any gamer can get, and they tell us about it. So this is a Facebook game, and so one of the things that we did do is we engaged with them pretty actively through Facebook. And boy, you better believe it, they told us what they did and did not like about the game. They told us what they thought about us. Over here in the corner, this is a sea slug. That's what they call us. You sea slugs are moving too slowly, not getting us enough content, not giving us this. What part of their aggravation is typical gamer aggravation, but part of it was we had inherited this game that had some major design flaws. So there's a level cap. And there was a limited land usage. So the users that we had that were very engaged quickly got up to level max, which was level 70. We didn't have a good sink for silver, other than buying land, which they bought all the land and they filled it up with isometric objects. And the other big problem was scenes, right? They liked new chapters and like new hidden object scenes. You know, though we could not produce them at the rate that the audience consumed it, partly because of the balance of the title. So, oh my God, it was, in terms of the revenue side of things, it was a pretty good game. Actually, it turns out that it was making us money. We implemented ads, but even for the audience, we were doing about 5 to 6 cents average revenue per daily active user, which is, pretty good for a Facebook game. We're making profit off of it, but because of these problems, we were kind of seeing the audience slip away. And so, and here, this is kind of, I look through in the time frame, kind of like a good, post that pretty much said it. And this lady's a genius, whoever it is. I'll read it really quickly. Like, attention developers, if you wish to keep established player interest in this game, you need to take care of the following issues. 1, increase levels to 150 to show the true level of the 141 neighbors I currently have on level 70. 2, increase the size of the town. 3, release new chapters every 1 or 2 weeks. 4, introduce more quests. 5, add new decorations, buildings, etc., place them in the town. If you can accomplish all of this, then those who have quit will return to the game and continue play. Otherwise, you lose them permanently. So, that was a really good message, but indicative of a lot of what we were seeing at the time. And here's a poll of like, hey, what do you guys want? Everyone wanted new chapters. And so, as I said, when we were running this game, this is about 2 years ago, we were, work for hire studio. We were building Adara. This game was not our focus. It started actually generating revenue for us, completely different model for us, and we're like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we make these ladies happy? How do we fix this, this thing that could potentially be a big hit for us, or a money generator, but was currently dying under its own weight. So that's our main character. Like, oh, what are we gonna do? And so one day I had the brilliant idea. I went to a game conference, and during the time, everyone was talking about events. And events were, primarily they were talking about them in the context of card-based games. They were talking about it, a lot of RPG games. I think like Hellfire, Puzzles and Dragons, those types of titles were doing events and raids, and it's just like, oh, this is the greatest stuff. And so, brilliant us, like, well, what we should do, let's not do all that stuff that the ladies are actually asking us for. Mainly, partially because it was too expensive, and partially because we couldn't keep up the pace. Let's see if we can do a raid, right? Which is like, oh, don't do that. Here, this is my fun. Don't you know raids are for boy games? And so, why did that idea come to our mind? Why was that the thing that jumped versus doing exactly what they said? And so, I just pulled this off of World of Warcraft wiki. So raids are designed as activities for people whose characters have reached the maximum level. As the game does not permit further increase of skills or introduce new abilities, the only avenues remaining to enhance a character lay in better gear, right? And so I was never an avid World of Warcraft player, but I have a lot of friends that were, and they would just not stop talking about raids, right? They talked about it on the social aspect. They talked about it in terms of how they were going to split up the loot and who which roles. I've never seen for a long time. I hadn't seen my friends as animated about an aspect of the game, and it just occurred to me. It was like, well, these are a lot of the same problems that our audience is having, and they're equally, if not at least equally passionate about this game as I've observed my friends are as passionate with World of Warcraft, and so maybe there's something here. And so kind of production-wise, we had been working with a company called DNA, which they had made Hellfire, and we were making clones of based on their engine, and their Hellfire game was very event and raid specific. And the reasoning around what a lot of they're doing is they actually saved on a lot of the development costs by organizing their events around very cheap to produce content. And so, for us, those were the ISO objects. Those are actually very cheap for us to produce compared to a hidden object scene. The other big aspect was what we observed about our audience is they weren't being that social. And so a raid is implicitly social, right? You try and get as many people to attack a big monster because otherwise you can't beat that monster. But then so that's a social experience, and then trading the loot and sharing the loot, that becomes part of the social experience. And so we wanted to drive that point home as well. So starting to look a little bit better. And then it came to kind of some of the design challenges. There's a big question in the studio when I brought up the idea, and pretty much to anyone, is just like, oh, they just won't get it. It'll be too complicated. I think in my team, like especially anyone that worked with the community, like they had kind of a poor opinion of the audience in terms of their ability to adapt to new things, which turned out to be true to some degree. But kind of the hard line that I at least tried to take was, it's more about how you translate it. It's more about how you present it, not an implicit incapacity of the audience to be able to understand a concept like that. And so, in terms of design, excuse me, it would be cool to have a monster just like smash through someone's seaside town. Like that would be cool for me, but that didn't really make sense for the audience. And so the big question is like, well, what's the big boss? Like, what are these older women going to get excited about to work together? What's a problem that they can work together to solve that would result in them earning loot, like special loot that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and then put them in a situation where they have to share it. And so that was the kind of design challenge that we worked with. And here's sort of what we came up with. So the idea was, a storm had hit Seaside, and luckily, excuse me, your town survived, but the towns surrounding your town are having trouble and they need your help. And so the idea is we structure the isometric engine so that we made these little pre-made towns and just smashed everything and made it on fire. And the idea was, the audience gets to be FEMA, and they work together to repair someone else's town. The entire concept is based around, let me just see what my next slide is. Oh yeah, it's based around appeal, like how nice looking the town is. And so the idea is you've got to restore, your neighbor's appeal back to what it was, and then you get all these great rewards. So that was the concept that we went with. Another aspect of an event or a raid is, you have high-level players. You want to give them some advantage for their mastery over the game. And so, what did that translate into in terms of our game? Well, the only real skill to our game was the hidden object scenes, and we had a mastery concept. It was kind of like a stars-based system where the more you play, excuse me, the more you play it, it gets incrementally more difficult, and you earn more stars. Or we had their anchors. You can earn up to 5 anchors, and the economy balance was, in order to get all 5 anchors for a level, you'd have to play it about 80 times. And so, all these high level, which is ridiculous, I know, but so for all these high level players, they played all the scenes to death, right? So they knew where every single object was. And so what we did is we introduced a new kind of object, which was a pearl, which was you invested it. That's what you had to spend pearls to repair the other people's towns. And we hid them throughout every single hidden object scene. So we hid 8 pearls, which was cost effective for us because hiding a single object, takes an artist to do. We can do 10 scenes in an afternoon, and tricky for people, right? Because we never listed pearls as something that you could find. You still had to complete the level, and if you happen to see the pearls, as a bonus, you earn the pearls that you got. And so we would tell them which levels had pearls in them. They were limited time, so if you found all the pearls in one scene, you'd have to come back tomorrow to find them again. So that was kind of the mastery component. And this is, okay, thank you. This is my most hate. So again, this is another kind of problem. We ended up kind of creating this sort of complicated game loop, which I'm going to try and point at, which is, so, okay, these towns come up like monsters. So as you're playing the game, all of a sudden, oh, the town of Woodbury needs your help. And that would take you to this map screen, which would show you all the towns. This is kind of teaching you how to play the game. And then you go into the town, and you get to repair it. And this is slots where you invite friends to come play. And this is kind of telling how much pearls you have to play to repair this town and each building. So in principle, it sounded simple, but in practice, it was really difficult. And then we added this limited time element. so that when you encountered a town for the first time, you only had 2 days to get all your friends together and repair them. And so there was 10 towns. The first 5 towns you could do by yourself, and then after you got to the 6th and 7th town, you needed 2 or 3 people, and then the final towns you needed basically 6 people to join. If you wanted to have a prayer of completing it, and then you shared loot. So this is an example of the town itself. I'll skip through that. The loot sharing, we used kind of something similar to what's seen in Warcraft, where we did, the person that saved the last building, they got one of the best prizes, gold, which is like our premium currency. The person that restored the most appeal, as was more active, they won land, which is our second most important thing. Repaired most buildings. Someone that joined last got a prize. The first one to join after someone, so it was kind of cool, but it ended up being pretty complicated and, especially very difficult to present to the audience. And so in terms of their reaction, I'm not going to read all these, but it was mixed, right? So the top 2, these are people who just hated it. They thought that we had completely changed the game from under them. We thought we'd taken their game away and replaced it with this crazy thing. But then a lot of people actually, once they understood it, they really liked it. And I didn't put some of these posts, but the audience started actually gaming the system. And so what they would do is when someone found one of the more valuable towns, which are the later towns, they would get all their buddies in and decide, who would join next, who would build the last building, so that they could share the gold, which is essentially, that maps to money in our game. And so, the people that liked it, they were like ridiculously into it, and the people that didn't like it, they told us about it, and they hated us. So it was, I wouldn't say it was an even split, but it was definitely an interesting reaction. So it, proved to me that there was something here. We probably screwed up the execution of it, but it definitely brought a different dynamic to the audience. They were complaining about new things. Let me just put it that way. And like, oh, where do I get more pearls? It changed the conversation, which I thought was interesting. All right, I'm over time, so let me just see. So in terms of summary, this is the doubling ARPDAU piece. So we did double our ARPDAU. The way that worked is the towns got exponentially harder to complete, and we didn't release the last 2 towns. The whole event was limited time. We only ran it over the course of 3 weeks, and we didn't release the last 2 towns until the last 2 or 3 days. So you just had enough time, if you were engaged, to get enough friends together and finish the last town, and that's where everyone spent all their money. And so, like I said, our ARPDAU is around 6 cents on average. On the last, end of the last week of both times that we ran the raid, it went up to 12 cents, which was, the most that our game had ever made. It still is the most money per user that the game ever made. Like I said, it changed the conversation. People were sharing and sharing differently. The bad thing was, we did notice an overall decline in our DAU. So the people that we pissed off, we really pissed them off. And the other thing is, the game wasn't really built that well in the first place, which, yes, we built the game, but it was kind of rushed out as part of the work for hire project that we were doing. And so, where we had estimated implementing the raid and running it and even turning it on and off would be a quick process, it was actually 3 or 4 times more expensive and difficult to do than we anticipated. So overall we lost money on this, and the idea was we implement it once, we make it so we can turn it on and off, but it didn't turn out that way, which is embarrassing. But whatever, we learned a lot by doing it. And one of the biggest mistakes in terms of aggravating the audience is our tutorial for the raid. We built a tutorial that took you through all these steps, which, as I pointed out, is a pretty complicated chain of events. We made it forced. It wasn't an opt-in tutorial, and that's where I think we got the most rage posts. And game design-wise, idiotic plan, but that we only know that in hindsight. So, and so I think that this is the end of my slides. Basically the conclusions. If you have this kind of audience, they're gamers too. they're going to respond the same way you would expect other gamers to respond, regardless of the genre of game, and as passionately, and they respond with dollars. There's a chance that raids specifically can work. It seems, if we had executed on all levels, I think we would definitely have a different result. And as with anything design, if you plan ahead and keep it as simple as possible, you'll probably succeed a lot better than we did in this situation. So that's all I have, and yeah, so it's hopefully something to think about.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks. I always think these honest approaches of the games, of where it works and where it doesn't, are actually the best. You see a lot of speakers come up and they talk about, this is how I was successful, but they didn't talk about all the other steps of what they made in between, of where we've all screwed up, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what's funny is when you're working through something like this, you find little pieces that you can then bring into other games for your business in the future. And I think that's the exciting part, is taking a look at where you succeeded, taking a look at where you failed, and try to make those adjustments in future games down the road. And I think that's a lot of credit to him here. Does anyone have any questions for Aaron before we wrap it up? We have a couple minutes. Sure.
Hey.
Hi, so maybe I missed it because I missed like the first 2 minutes or so of the presentation. But as you're doing games for a female audience, especially an older female audience, how is your studio split up between male and female, and maybe even age-based?
Yeah. So at the time.
Exactly at that time, of course.
Yeah, at the time, so I try to keep, I try to keep the balance, as especially during hiring, the best we can. But to be perfectly frank, there was the designer that was working on this. He was a guy. He was, we got him out of a school. He wanted to make RPG games, and so there was a lot of design iteration as a result of that. And the one female that was working on this project was coordinating the art, and so we ended up and she happened to know she'd been working on the game since the beginning. She had engaged with the audience a lot more, and so we ended up pulling her into the design process a little bit, even though she was kind of out of her element. But the feeling was that her instincts were a lot better just because of her exposure to the audience. So yeah, we're still majority male company. I think we're trying to do better, but it's definitely a challenge, especially making games for this kind of audience.
Yeah, and developers based in the coast of the U.S., it's it seems to be more male, as well, and some on the West Coast have definitely been more, I don't know, they're more diverse.
Yeah.
And I think, as a game studio, you're based in Massachusetts,
That's right, yeah.
And I was based in New York, and it's just a very male-dominated, and it's really hard to actually get that mix in, especially for games like this when that's your demographic. It's definitely one of those challenges. Just in the back? Great.
What is the percentage of the audience that engaged in this?
It's a really good question. So another stumble is we didn't have a really great analytics package hooked up. Like, we were just starting, like, this was the first game that we'd started to run as a service, and so we were just understanding how to look at just the money part of it. The impression that we got, just from the forum posts is, well, there was a forced tutorial, so essentially anyone that played the game during the period had an opinion about the raid, and it's hard to judge based on the community post, right? Because it's sort of like the noisy few. But on my observation, there was more positive posts, but the negative ones were like ridiculously negative, and then there's some in the middle where they were negative first, and then they were like, oh, but I do need some more pearls, come on. So I think it was probably split, but on the other hand, I think the people that we lost, I don't think they ever came back, and so that's, you never want to implement a feature like that in any game. So
It is amazing how much hate mail
Yeah.
you can get, and then
Yeah.
people keep telling you how long they've hated it, which means they're still playing it.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's hard to
kind of-
interpret a lot of that stuff. So
Thank you very much.
yeah,
Nice job, man.
thank you.